Today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials of this sort where a is not equal to 1. So ax squared plus bx plus c, a is not equal to 1. In previous videos we've talked about how to factor trinomials like this where a is equal to 1. We take this number, we find two numbers that multiply to make that number, add to make this one. We check to make sure our signs are going to work. So minus 6 plus 1 is minus 5. Positive times a negative is a negative. We have to get that sign here. If those tests work, then we simply write out our two factors. Okay? Now, when we're factoring this type where a is not equal to 1, it's a little bit harder. Okay? So let's start with one that's not too bad. And that's this one here. Everything's positive, that helps. Now, with these types of factoring situations, you cannot go directly to your two brackets once you find the numbers, okay? I've seen people try it and it almost always doesn't work out. Or if it does work out, it's a fluke. So here's what you do. You take these two numbers and you multiply them, okay? And you're going to put that number over to the side. Then you need factors of this number that add to make the middle number, all right? Now, we can do the same thing that we did before. We can, list the pairs of factors. And of course, this is something that you're going to want to do if you can't come up with the numbers right off the top of your head. Then 4 and 7 multiply to make 28. Now these two numbers, when added, will give me 11, won't they? And the same test as in the other one works. So, you get plus or minus 29 here, plus or minus 27, plus or minus 16, plus or minus 12, and here we're getting plus or minus 11, plus or minus 3. Well, since it's plus 11 we're after, we now say, okay, how do I get plus 11 from those two numbers? These two numbers must both have a plus sign on them in order to get positive 11. Then when I multiply those two signs, am I getting this sign? The answer is yes. Now, the next step is to pull apart that middle term using those two numbers. Okay, it doesn't matter what order you put them in. Makes no difference. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to wrap brackets around the first two terms and brackets around the last two terms. And it's absolutely critical that that sign, whether it's a plus or a minus, that's in between the brackets here, that it stays on the outside of the brackets, okay? So don't do this. Don't put the brackets like that. Now, we're going to look and see what's common here. So what's common to those two terms is 2x, and we're going to factor that out, which leaves us with x plus 2. So remember, factoring is division. So if we now went backwards, we would go 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 2 is 4x. So that's correct, right? Okay, then here we have a common 7. So what you're going to do is write this sign and then stop and look and see what's common here. Okay, it's 7. And when I write the contents of the brackets, what I want you to notice is that they're the same as the contents of the other brackets. If they're not, something's gone wrong somewhere, you've made a mistake. These have to be the same, okay? Now, I'll explain a little bit more why they're likely to be the same, because here's where your hard work's going to go on, and if these tests are working out, this is going to work, okay? Now, one of your factors is right here. So let's write it out. 2x plus 7. And the other factor is whatever is inside your brackets. X plus 2. Okay, and that's it. It's done. Now, let's take this and let's go backwards with it. So we can do it the usual way, which is just simply foiling. Okay, 2x times x, 2x squared. 2x times 2, 4x. 7 times x, 7x, and 7 times 2, 14. Look, that's exactly what we have up here. So it's it's just a multiplying out process in reverse, which is what division is actually, right? Okay, and then we're going to pull those two terms together, and we're going to get exactly what we started with. So this process here is about figuring out what those middle numbers are, and going in the opposite order of what you go in when you're multiplying. Now, one of the schools that I've been dealing with in the last 20 years it recently started teaching a way of multiplying out binomials like this by doing it this way. So this here has to get multiplied by all of that. So we could write it like that. We could say, okay, 2x has to get multiplied by x plus 2. And then that plus 7 also has to get multiplied by x plus 2. And look, we have what we have here. Now, where this gets a little harder is when we have minus signs in it. All right, so how about that one? So again, A isn't 1, so we have to do it the long way. We have to do what's called decomposition. That's what this method is called. So we take these two numbers, the 3 and the 2, we multiply them, we get 6. Now, we do the same process as though A were 1. When we get to this stage, we say, okay, 1 and 6 multiplies to make 6. What signs do we need to get -5? Well, this has to be a minus and that has to be a plus. Now, what happens when we multiply those signs? Do we get this sign? No, we do not. So those are not the right numbers, okay? Don't start monkeying around with the signs, because then you won't have -5 anymore. So then, do we have other possibilities? Well, we have 2 and 3. They multiply to make 6. And if I put a minus on both of them, we're going to get -5. What happens when I multiply two negatives? I get a positive. So that tells me that these are the correct two numbers with which to pull apart that middle term. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go 3x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 2. And this here is just minus 5x. Now keep in mind, when you write out this step, space it nicely so that you've got room to get your brackets in there. Okay, now here's a twist. When I put the brackets around this, I'm actually changing this expression because of that minus sign. If I took the brackets off right now, here's what I'd have. 3x squared minus 2x minus 3x minus 2, because that minus has to multiply through. And I'd have this. But that's not what I started with, is it? So one thing that you have to remember is when you put brackets around, if the sign in between the brackets is a minus sign, this sign needs to change, and you're just going to write it over top. Okay? Because brackets mean multiply, so as soon as I put the brackets there, I'm saying multiply that negative through to both those signs, both these terms rather, and that's going to change this one. It's not going to change this one ever, because we've got the bracket right in front of the term. There's no sign in front of it. Okay? And now we do exactly what we did with the other example. We look at what's common. Okay, what's common here is just x, that's it. You take out the x, and you write what's left over. Write this sign. This sign never changes, okay? It always stays the same. And then we look at this and we say, well, there's nothing common at all. But notice that the 3x minus 2 is the same contents of brackets I'm about to write as what I have here. So we know that that is correct. Okay, now, my two factors, here's where a lot of people go wrong. They see the x and they don't see another number here and they think it's x times 3x minus 2 or something like that. It's not. Remember, this came from two binomials, this, originally, okay? Here's one of your factors, and if there's no number there, well then that number is 1. And the other factor is the contents of the brackets, okay? So if you multiplied it out, you would have 3x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 2. And then 3x squared minus 5x plus 2. And that's it, you're done, okay? And so you can see that changing that sign was not just a whim. It was not because I anticipated needing to have the same sign so that the contents of the brackets was the same. It was algebraically necessary because otherwise I'm changing the value of what I've started with if I leave that as a plus sign. All right? Okay, next one. 6x squared minus 13x plus 6. All right, keep in mind too that you want to watch and see if there's anything in common with all your terms. So there isn't here, otherwise it would make our work a little easier if we could factor something out, but there's nothing in common. So we do what we do, we take these two numbers, we multiply them, and we look for factors of that number that add to give us the middle one. So maybe you can't think of them right away, you need to list them. So 37 or 35, right? Plus or minus, not 13. How about 2 and 18? Well, that gives us 20 or 16. 3 and 12 give us 15 or 9. So again, not 13. 4 and 9. 4 and 9 give us 13 when we add them, don't they? So we need two minus signs. Minus 4 minus 9 is minus 13. Then, when we multiply those two negatives, are we getting this sign? Yeah, we are. So those are the correct numbers with which to pull apart the middle term. So that's your next step. We're just going to pull apart that middle term. And again, give yourself lots of room, like so. And brackets. So brackets around the first two terms, brackets around the last two terms. This is a minus, so this sign has to change to its opposite sign. Just write it over top, don't scribble it out, okay? Common to these two terms is 2x, which leaves us with 3x minus 2. Write the sign and stop, okay? What's common to these? Now, you can help yourself out a little bit here. You can see easily what's common is 3, but it's also helpful to look at this and say, well, I need to get this. I know I will get this because I've been so careful with the work I did over here. I know these are the right numbers. So if I'm anticipating getting this, then I know I've got to divide 9 by 3 in order to get that 3x that I need up front. And then, of course, the rest of it just follows, okay? So you can kind of help yourself out a little bit. It's almost a little bit of cheating. Because you know you've done the work carefully here, you know these are going to be the same. And it will show up for you if they're not the same. If you've made a mistake somewhere, the most common error is that people forget to change this sign when this is a minus. And then you get down here and you go to write a plus and you say, oops, I forgot to change the sign, which is not a big deal. You just go up to the line above, change the sign, and you're good to go. Okay, so now my factors are 2x minus 3, and 3x minus 2. Okay, and that one is factored. And we'll do one more example. All right, so this one is exactly the same as the others. We just take those two numbers. Notice I'm not writing negative 24. I'm going to worry about the signs after, all right? We can see right away that the numbers are 8 and 3, all right? So this is where your times table comes in really handy. It's going to make this work so much faster. We're going to say, okay, that's got to be a minus and that's got to be a plus in order to get negative 5 when adding them. And then when I multiply those two signs, am I getting this sign? Yeah, I am. Now, I'm going to do this two ways. I'm going to write it out first of all with minus 8 plus 3 and then plus 3 minus 8 to show you that it doesn't matter what order you write the middle terms in, okay? So we'll do it this way first. So 6x squared minus 8x plus 3x minus 4, bracket, 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 bracket. Common here is 2x, leaving us with 3x minus 4. Now notice that because there's plus sign here, I didn't have to change the sign, okay? And then 3x minus 4, because there's nothing in common. So 2x plus 1 is one of the factors, and the other one is the contents of the brackets. There, it's done. Now, if I chose to write the middle terms in the opposite order, it would look like this. Now, algebraically, we're still getting -5 here, aren't we? Same as we did here. So it really doesn't matter what order we write the middle terms in. I'll prove that to you. So, bracket, 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 bracket. Now, because we have a minus sign here, this side's got to change. So I'm just going to put a plus over top. Common to these two terms is 3x, which leaves us with 2x plus 1 minus, write that sign, remember this sign never changes, write that sign, stop and look to see what's common between these two terms. Okay, it's 4, which leaves us with 2x plus 1. See how it's the same as the other bracket? Okay, it's got to be. If we're careful with this work here, this will work out. This is where the heavy lifting goes on. This part's all mechanical, okay? So, notice too that we get the same two factors, of course we do, because it's the same process. It's just that they come out differently, right? So what I like to say is the factors will always fall out for you, but if you put your middle terms in reverse order, they just fall out differently. So here we have the 2x plus 1 on the outside. Here we have the 2x plus 1 on the inside. Here the 3x minus 4 was on the inside. Here it's on the outside. But same answer. All right? Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, share widely, and subscribe to my channel so that I can get lots of views. Okay? Thanks so much, and until next time.